Good morning, Texoma. I'm Ashley Fitzwater. This morning, we are taking a look at stories you will only see on 6. These special reports are stories that really matter most to you. And this morning, I'm sitting down with the reporters who put them together and giving you an inside look at what they took away. Joining me with our first only on 6 story is Jack Lamson. And Jack is here today to talk about his story, which was about texting and driving and basically titled, Get Off the Road. So when you're talking about texting and driving, that's what you need to do, right?
And that's really the key and I guess the really pointed thing that we came away with from this, from leaders at every level, was if you need to do this, then just get off the road to do it. If it's something so important that it really has to happen right then and it can't be done with a phone call, pull over real quick and get it done like that, because you'll keep yourself safe, you'll keep everyone else safe that's on the road, and while there isn't really anything in place yet to keep people from doing it, what everyone really came back to is common sense.
And that's interesting you bring that up, because they are looking at laws. There's different takes on should there be a law in place, should police be out there enforcing people who are caught texting and driving, and what did you find from our local department? From the local department, it was kind of something that they felt should be regulated at a higher level. That way it's not like you can text and drive in Seymour, but as soon as you cross into Wichita Falls, you can't. Right.
So they felt like it should be more across the board. The biggest issue with any kind of law is, do you ban all cell phone use altogether? Because then how do you differentiate between dialing a phone number and sending a text message?
Sure.
If you say, hey, how are you? That's the same number of keystrokes that it takes. So the enforcement and proving it becomes very difficult for law enforcement. And I know we're going to watch your story here in just a moment. You're going to hear much more about that. But real quickly, Jack, just on the side we may not see, what did you find maybe most surprising about this, or what did you learn that you didn't know before? Most of the video that we had of people texting and driving was actually taken when we were out at a stationary position. We got out of the car and got people as they were coming up to stoplights and things like that. And even then it was hard for us to tell what they were doing, but trying to actually use the camera in a vehicle while we were moving and find someone else in their vehicle, you know, people are smart, because people know that law enforcement will look for you to swerve into someone else's lane, so they keep their phone down here below where you can't see it. So shooting it was very difficult, but you know, we did get the video that we needed, and fortunately we didn't see anybody swerving all over the road. But nonetheless, you know, keep your eyes up when you can. Any last bit of information maybe you can share with Texoma that you learned, maybe it was talking to someone who admitted to texting and driving, that you've taken away from this personally? Well, I talked to a couple people who had some personal experiences about some issues that they had losing some friends and things like that. So it can happen to anybody. When you think it can't happen to you, it very well might. All right, the lesson definitely to take away today. Jack, thank you for your time. Of course. And we look forward to taking another look at a story you will only see on 6, Get Off the Road.
From eating and drinking to smoking and changing the radio, it's easy to get distracted while driving.
I see people swerving all the time, and yeah, it's dangerous.
But nothing takes your eyes off the road quite like texting and driving.
I just see their eyes up and down, up and down. And it don't take but a fraction of a second. That's all it takes.
News Channel 6 and AT&T teamed up to give Texoma a first-hand look at the dangers of texting and driving with a simulator at Midwestern State University last fall. It's an experience Mayor Glenn Barham remembers well.
I only ran over a couple of people, but yeah, it's an eye-opening experience to get in that simulator.
The dangers are clear, but it's not an issue the Wichita Falls City Council has addressed.
It's not come before this council, but a lot of people are talking about it. Of course, if we had 3 councilors bring it up and they wanted to discuss it, then we would certainly have that discussion.
Mayor Barham believes any legislation against texting while driving should be done at the state level. 39 states have already banned texting and driving for anyone behind the wheel at any time. Texas is not one of those states, but we did come close. State Senator Craig Estes told us he and a majority of other Texas lawmakers voted for a ban during the last legislative session 2 years ago, but it was vetoed by Governor Rick Perry.
To me, texting and driving don't mix, and people are being killed, and I was proud to vote for it last session, and I'll vote for it again this session if I have the opportunity to.
Governor Perry said the bill overreached, but newly elected State Representative James Frank sees a different problem with any proposed legislation.
The texting while driving was illegal, but yet you could dial your phone while driving. You could talk on your phone while driving, which seems, I'm trying to figure out how the enforcement of this is going to happen.
If the law was to pass in that form, it would be a difficult process.
Wichita Falls Police Sergeant John Spraggins points out there are already laws in place against reckless driving, swerving into other people's lanes and driving dangerously below or above the speed limit, a practice many have seen around town.
I drive up and down Highway 287 practically every day, and I see people in the passing lane talking on their cell phone, driving below the speed limit.
Heading down Kell Freeway, as I was fixing to overtake a vehicle that was driving 10 miles or so under the speed limit, that vehicle started drifting into my lane, and I honked my horn, but as I passed the individual, and it was a young person, he's sitting there with his hand on the steering wheel and he's texting away.
I think he should be off the phone. I think he should pull over.
Some, like Rachel Denny, openly admit to texting while driving. You're willing to take the risk?
Yes, I mean, I'm guilty of it, so yes, I take the risk often.
We ran into one Texoman who used to be just as guilty, but Roland Marchand says recent experiences are keeping him off the phone.
And some friends of mine got killed and stuff like that, I don't even think you should text unless you pull over or even use your phone.
Jack Lamson, News Channel 6.
Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are taking a look at stories you will only see on 6. Our next story is called Digital Death. Crystal Hall, our very own Crystal Hall, did this story. So Crystal, thanks for being here and giving us kind of an insight look at your story. Now, it's all about digital death, and that's basically tied back to social networking. Many of us have not just one, but numerous accounts, and you took a look at what happens when you die to those accounts.
It's something that people don't think about. I know I personally have a Twitter, and I also have a Facebook account. And so, what happens to that when you die? It's not something that people think about. And so, going into this story, it really opened my eyes. And I spoke with some experts about it, and they had a lot of information about what people should do. And I even have some paperwork that they gave me about filling out this paperwork, leaving it with family and friends, leaving it near your will, but not necessarily a part of your will, just so that they have that information.
And why would you not want to leave it maybe in your will, so to speak?
Because this is what they told me. They said that once you die, your will is probated, and so when that happens, it becomes public record, and so you don't want your personal information out there.
Then everybody can have access to your account, so that definitely would not help your family by any means. A lot of people, though, and I know we're going to see in your story, you spoke with a woman who they use these Facebook accounts almost to remember or to honor the people whose lives were lost, to speak with them instead of maybe going to the grave as you would normally think. So is this something these companies and these social networking sites they allow for you to do?
Facebook has something where you can memorialize the page
of
someone once they passed away, and all you need to do is just contact Facebook about that. And so it's just a little different, but you can post comments on there about how you remember that person, and I think that that's becoming a trend, in this digital age where people now go to online sites to remember a person versus going to their grave.
It is something interesting. It just shows how much our generations are changing and our lives are changing with social networking. One last question for you. What was the most surprising thing that you maybe walked away from with this story?
I was surprised by a lot of it. But I think just the most surprising is just not very many people think about this or know about this. I know I was kind of caught off guard too whenever I was doing this story. And so it really opened my eyes about it, something that I personally need to look into as well. And so I think that was the most surprising of it.
Yeah, and interesting that you need to write down maybe your password and your accounts and stuff for family. I think that's pretty interesting too. But Crystal is going to explain much more on how to do that. You're also going to hear, like I mentioned, that personal story from loved ones maybe you can even relate with, who honor those whose lives have been lost through their social networking sites. So Don't go anywhere. Her story starts right now.
It was last May when Allie Eccles' world was forever changed. Her uncle, Buddy Cannon, passed away at the age of 54.
He was the kind of man that, I knew who I wanted in a husband because I had him as a role model.
Memories of him teaching her how to drive still bring a smile to her face. Then she is still comforted by his online pictures. She clicks through them often and types encouraging messages on his Facebook wall. It's become quite common to see a person's Facebook page memorialized after death. Kind words and thoughtful messages keep the page alive.
It was like a way for us to express our final goodbyes for those of us who weren't there in person.
It's become such an occurrence for Facebook that the social networking site even has a policy to memorialize the account of a deceased person. But deleting those accounts isn't as easy as the click of a mouse.
Things that we post can be out there for much longer than we ever would have thought, and to a much broader audience than we ever would have thought.
It's one of those areas where the law has not caught up yet to the technology.
Cara Blanco is an associate attorney at Gibson Davenport Anderson. She says the more seminars she's attending, the more she's learning about planning for what are now known as digital assets.
Make a list of all of these sorts of assets that you have, and on that list put your login information, the username and the password.
There's paperwork that some estate planning attorneys have. You can fill out your personal online account information, everything from Facebook to PayPal and even iTunes.
Make sure to keep that in a secure location, maybe wherever you have your will stored, like in a safe deposit box.
But don't actually put that information in your will because it will become public record once it's probated, and those passwords will enable others to hack the accounts. Every networking site is a bit different. Facebook, for example, if you're a family member and you want the page of a deceased to be memorialized, you simply notify Facebook. If you want it deleted and you don't have the login and password information, it's a lengthy process that requires a proof of death with a news article or death certificate. Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest follow the same policies. Of course, you can avoid all of that hassle by simply filling out some digital assets paperwork.
Once we're gone, we've lost our chance to have an impact over what happens to our content. But if we do some planning up front, then we can help that decision process.
That you might.
There are some sites available that actually do that planning for you, though they're not for free. Some funeral homes are now offering the free service of a memorial at your fingertips.
They set up this amazing website. So you could go and you could click on pictures, you can click on add stories about him.
Your digital footprint is a piece of history that can be here forever, even if you're not. So planning what to do with it isn't just a walk in the park, it's serious business. Crystal Hall, News Channel 6.
Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are taking a look at stories you will only see on 6. Chris Horgan joins us now with a look inside his story that was all about smoke detectors, smoke alarms, false alarms, something important that everyone, of course, needs to have in their home. Chris, I personally have 2, and I understand they're very important when those final seconds count. But what I think is so interesting about Chris's story is the fact that it actually matters what type of detector you have in your home.
It really does, because every fire is not the same kind of fire. There's 2 basic type of home fires. There's what's called a smoldering fire, which is a lot of times a slow, smoky kind of fire, not a lot of flames, just a lot of smoke. And then there's a fire, where like in your kitchen you have a pot that catches on fire or the oven was left on, and I mean, God forbid you actually have one of those, but you certainly want to be warned, don't you? I think you do. And so there are 2 different basic technologies when it comes to smoke detectors, and each one performs differently, as we found and as the Texas A&M study found, as far as when they go off.
And I know your story is going to break that down for us, and we're going to get a chance to see really how those work. What did you find, though, to be maybe the most surprising or something you really just didn't know before going in this?
Well, when we did our test, as you're going to see, the difference between when the alarm sounded was not huge. It was enough because seconds count in these situations, but I didn't know there were 2 different kinds of smoke detectors. I thought smoke detectors were all the same technology. Everybody's got the same ones, but now I know the difference, and I'm changing the ones at my house.
Wow, so it's even made a difference in your personal smoke detectors.
It has, it has.
That's interesting. Anything else maybe you can share with us just a little bit of more insight, you know, that maybe you weren't able to add your story, a little bit of extra that, you know, might find interesting to those at home.
I think it's really interesting the way these things work because technology is amazing. And as it's come along, the one that is the most common is called an ionized smoke detector. And it actually, it's not old technology, but it's older technology that continues to work. I mean, it works. It's not a problem. If you've got one, get it. If you don't have one, get one. It's the cheaper one, and it works just fine. But when seconds count, we're going to find out about it. But I also found out that they've utilized a different kind of photo technology that wasn't available years ago that is now available that really does make a difference.
It's interesting. And what about price? Is there a big difference in the prices?
There's about a $10 difference, depending on what kind you buy. There are multiple brands out there, and we stuck with First Alert. It's one of the leading brands. There's also the second leading brand, or another leading brand is called Kitty. Regardless, anyone will work, and anyone could save your life. So that's the thing to remember here. And the price is really, it's just depending on your level of personal security, how secure you want to feel, but nothing's over $25 in front of me, which is pretty good.
Yeah, something almost everyone can definitely afford, you know, just to shell out that extra 25 bucks might save your life.
Peace of mind is something that everybody needs.
Oh, it's everything. Well, Chris, thank you so much, and
bet.
we look forward to watching your story. So in case you missed it the first time, here's another look at smoke detectors, false alarm, a story you will only see on 6.
There's a number of different types of smoke detectors that are available to the public, and one of the things that we realized today was how quickly some do operate as opposed to other different types.
There are different types of smoke alarms. The most common and least expensive is what's called an ionization smoke detector. It, in simple terms, samples the air. It uses positive and negative charge plates, and when the plates become unbalanced, that alarm goes off. The other kind of alarm is called a photoelectric detector. It uses a beam of light and a mirror. When that light's obstructed, the alarm sounds. The third is known as a dual alarm. It has both the sensors, and it's the most expensive of the three. Now, the dual alarm is what the U.S. Fire Administration, which is a department of FEMA, recommends that you use. The Texas A&M study that was done showed that in a smoldering fire, the ionized type smoke alarm was much slower in sounding than the photoelectric and the dual alarm. So we wanted to find out. We partnered up with the Wichita Falls Fire Department and put 3 alarms made by the same company to the test. With firefighters standing by, we first ran a smoldering fire test with a heat source and a piece of wood. It mimics the conditions of a slow smoldering fire. The first time we ran the test, the dual alarm sounded just 11 seconds in. The photoelectric alarm went off at 40 seconds, and the ionized alarm was almost a full minute after that. It sounded at 1 minute 37 seconds. We cleared the room and did the test 2 more times, adding more smoke. The ionized alarm sounded much quicker on those 2, and there was a much shorter interval between all 3 of them going off. That first test backed up what the Texas A&M study found. We had a 57-second difference between the photo and dual alarm going off and the ionized alarm sounding. We then tested all 3 in a large flaming fire, like one you might see in a kitchen. In our first test, the ionized alarm sounded at 1 minute and 27 seconds. The dual alarm went off just 4 seconds later, and the photoelectric alarm sounded 18 seconds after that. In our second and third large fire test, all 3 went off within 9 seconds of each other. All were consistent in that type of fire. Wichita Falls Fire Marshal David Collins tested with us. He emphasized that while there are different reaction times when it comes to smoke detectors, a working one inside your home is better than not having one at all.
The most important issue is that we all have working smoke detectors in the homes. If it's a multi-level home, have one on each level. Every bedroom needs one, every hallway that's adjacent to those bedrooms. And the batteries need to be checked on a regular basis if they are battery operated.
Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are taking a look at stories you will only see on 6. And today, joining me now with the very latest on her story is Christina Myers.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christina. And you talked about ADHD treatments. Now, I understand more than 10 million kids were actually diagnosed with ADHD in 2010. That is a big number, so it's very likely people at home maybe know someone who has been diagnosed with this, but What's so interesting is you took a look at alternative ways to be treated instead of maybe the typical medicine.
Exactly, because a lot of parents do want to turn away from medication, especially for younger children. The one that I specifically looked at is called neurofeedback training. And there's a place here in Wichita Falls, it's called ADHD Wichita Falls, and she basically trains patients to be able to control their brains themselves to either get off medication or not have to use it at all.
And I know you're going to break it down for us in the story, and it's interesting because it's done through video games. What did you find most surprising?
I didn't exactly know how the process worked until I got there to do the story and realized that they really play video games with their minds. Now, I'm an adult, and I thought that was exciting. I couldn't believe it. So imagine being a kid, and not only do you not have to go to the doctor's office anymore, but you are able to go to the doctors and play video games. So
that's really cool.
It's much easier for them to learn that way, too.
And you're being serious when you say with your mind. I mean, they're hooking them up to something and they're playing with their mind.
Exactly. I mean, one of the examples is a race car, so they'll be hooked up on their earlobes and the front of their head. And if they're concentrating, the race car will stay straight on the path, but if they lose concentration, it goes either left or right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whenever it comes to maybe how much this costs, does insurance cover it?
It is a newer process, so some insurances don't, but it is included in some insurance plans. And the owner of the lovely Diane Granberry, she works with her clients, actually has a really close relationship with them, and can kind of work on a sliding scale depending on what the clients can pay.
Perfect. Christina, thanks again for your time and, of course, your insight. And we just want to show you once again another look at her story, ADHD treatments.
Originally? Yes. Jennifer Murphy's 10-year-old daughter has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD.
Hi, thank you.
When she was diagnosed in the 1st grade, she tried medication. First, a patch.
It made her almost zombie-like. I mean, it worked fantastic, but it worked too well. And then she had a lot of trouble sleeping at night. And she had a lot of trouble. It makes her not want to eat.
Doctors switched Murphy's daughter to a different medication, but when the side effects were still too much, Murphy turned here to ADHD Wichita Falls. Owner and president Diane Granberry uses a relatively new process called neurofeedback training.
We take concentration for granted. We just think, oh, children automatically know how to concentrate. No, it's one of those things that is taught.
Most parents who turn to neurofeedback training are looking for an alternative to medicine.
I am not a fan of medication. I'm more holistic, good sleep, good diet, just get their energy out. Try and do things to make things work better without turning to easy ways like medication.
We've been working with medication. My goal is eventually that she won't have to have medication at all.
Okay, turn your head just a little that way. We begin that process with a baseline quantitative EEG of their prefrontal cortex. And from there, I test them in math and reading to see what their skill levels are.
After the initial assessment, clients begin a program based on their needs, a program that consists of controlling video games with their minds. For example, this race car game. If the client stays focused, the car moves in a straight line, but if they lose concentration, the car will shift left or right. While kids feel like they're playing a game, Granberry is actually monitoring their brain waves in real time from a separate computer. It may seem simple, but parents say they notice a difference.
I have seen a little bit of progress. His distraction is almost non-existent now. Concentration is a little lacking still, but I have seen a slight improvement.
Hank Howard says his 9-year-old son, who's about halfway through his training, is also getting better grades in school. And Murphy's daughter showed great progress in school, too, when she was retested a few months after starting her training.
She had made significant strides, whereas before she wasn't testing at all, really for where her grade level should be in math. She was about 1 grade level behind. And as far as reading, she had come up, significantly. So I was very pleased with that.
And at ADHD Wichita Falls, it's not just about helping the client mentally. Granberry suggests a lifestyle change and has clients keep track of their sleep, exercise, and protein intake.
You didn't go outside and play.
But medicine is a quick fix. And neurologist Dr. Eugene Pack says studies on neurofeedback training are new and somewhat inconsistent.
Some studies show about 80% improvement for patients. Some studies still show that, in practice at least,
it still does not benefit patients.
But Dr. Pack says neurofeedback training can be a viable option for patients looking to treat ADHD.
In my opinion as a neurologist, I do believe that it can be used as not only an alternative, but also to be used together with medication. Personally speaking, one versus the other really depends on personal preference, number one, and number two, different patients react differently. Some may benefit from both, or one from one or the other.
And neurofeedback training doesn't just treat ADHD, but trains clients to control their brains.
And one thing about neurofeedback training is that it is a lifetime. Once you teach the child how to regulate when he pays attention, how he focuses, and all that, it's like riding a bike, you never forget.
For parents who have tried neurofeedback training, they say it's worth a shot. Now, every client has their own goals in mind.
Better grades, better attention, lighten up on the daydreaming, and concentration levels. He kind of bounces around. He can't really focus all that well.
But for Murphy and her daughter, who just completed her training, the proof is in the results.
It really is quite fascinating to see how your child can go from being completely struggling to making these great strides. Not only is it affecting her in her schoolwork, but it's affecting her in every aspect. She's at home, she's a better listener, she cooperates better, we're not having as many struggles.
Christina Myers, News Channel 6.
Another story you will only see on 6 takes you behind prison doors. I had the opportunity to take an inside look at a prison ministry program called Kairos. It airs tonight on News Channel 6 at 10. Here's a special sneak peek of what you're going to see. Only on 6, we're taking you behind prison bars to see one organization changing the lives of those serving their time.
When I first entered the system, I found it hard to forgive myself for what I've done. So I wasn't really interested in anything that would change me. God said, hey, here's a fresh start. You made mistakes. Okay, but receive this gift of grace, receive this gift of forgiveness, and continue to move on. It gave me a new light on things, that things were going to be all right.
Why the change is necessary for these inmates.
If I continue to live this way, then what I did and that person's life that was lost was in vain.
And hear from the volunteers that make this program possible.
Once I got in, I got hooked. And it's the same way with many people. You wouldn't know that these guys, except for their whites, you wouldn't know that they had committed a crime if you were just sitting together and just talking.
It's an Only on 6 special report you'll see on News Channel 6 tonight at 10. Thanks for joining us, Texoma. As always, you can take another look at these stories on our website, newschannel6now.com. Once you're there, just click on the news link and then click on Only on 6. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here next Sunday morning for another look inside Texoma.